6 months have passed since the arrival of the emissaries. It's been a hard 6 months. Ladrana was a planned civilization, everything from community sizes to layout. Nothing was left to chance or desperation. Ladrana's population was only around 2 million with the arrival of One Earth, which had brought over 500,000 soldiers, their families, and civilian workers. This had put a tremendous strain on the resources they were able to provide. Mordecai was a farmer. He was used to providing for his family and the 10,000 residents in the area. Now he's being asked to triple his output, probably quadrupling it before the end of the year. He was now working 80 hours a week to meet his quota. He scoffed at the idea of being forced to have a quota. These people from Earth and the inner worlds had brought all the problems that people of Ladrana had wished to escape. Crime had increased, and there was a more complex monetary system being introduced that seemed as if it was designed purposely to keep you poor and constantly working. It didn't end there. Taxes were being introduced, but no value was being returned to them, nothing to show for what they were paying for. They were told it was to build a great new future and to provide safety and security. Ladrana definitely had more security now, but it was far less safe than it was before their arrival. Mordecai sank back in his chair on the porch. The sun had set long ago, and it was a bit cold out. But he was too tired to start a fire or go inside and get a blanket. He'd only seen Alicia and Aiden a few hours this week. They were both working in town. Aiden had become a stock boy at the grocery store, and Alicia was an attending doctor at the new medical center that was being built. But it was only accessible to One Earth's emissaries and their families. His stomach grumbled. He looked down at the watch on his wrist. It was around 10:45 p.m. Ladrana had a 27-hour and 16-minute day compared to Earth, but its year was almost twice as long. So they had to get creative on timekeeping on this world. They didn't feel it was needed to create a new time system, so they just adapted the one from Earth to here. It was confusing at first, but after the last few thousand years, he couldn't imagine what it would be like not to use it. 10:45 p.m. was pretty late, even with the extra hours in the day. He slowly rose from his chair, walking into the house. He got to the door, kicked off his dirty boots, then he realized how dirty he was. He and Leland were in the process of clearing another 100 acres and setting up the irrigation for it. It wasn't the hardest work, but it took a long time to do and left them both exhausted and covered in dirt and mud from head to toe each day. He entered the house and immediately headed to his bedroom on the lower floor and quickly undressed. In his boxers now, he put on a clean white shirt. His hunger had grown, so he put off taking a shower till after he ate. He walked to the kitchen. His muscles and joints ached. Even with their advanced medical technology, this hard work was taking its toll on him. He swore Leland was aging a few years each day he saw him, and Alicia's glow had begun to fade. Same with his son. He barely recognized him anymore. He had put on muscle and weight, and grown a beard. He lost his boyish charm. Mordecai sighed as he opened the fridge. There was plenty to eat, but not much would be quick and easy to prepare, except for maybe a sandwich. He rolled his eyes in disgust at the idea of a sandwich. There was no livestock on Ladrana, so it was all artificially grown. However, since the arrival of the emissaries, like most other things, had put a huge demand on the production of meat, and the emissaries added their own samples to be grown, stuff their palate was more adjusted to than the normal meat they grew. This stuff wasn't horrible, it just wasn't all that good. The stuff they called beef and chicken and pork was extremely low quality. He assumed it was because the population of the inner worlds had grown beyond their means to provide, so everything they grew was designed more for quantity than quality. He was about to give up when he noticed a paper note on the lid of one of the containers. He pulled it out. It had Alicia's handwriting on it. Had some time before work, made you some sketty. Hope you enjoy it. Love, Alicia. He smiled. Sketty was Alicia speak for spaghetti. He quickly opened it and smelled it. It was definitely one of his favorite dishes she made. It was spaghetti with fresh meat sauce. He even found a small shaker of Parmesan beside it. This made him smile. She was working as much as he was, and she was able to find the time to do something nice for him. He felt guilty that he wasn't able to do the same for her. He thought he would definitely need to make it up to her someday. He took the dish over to the microwave, opened the door, and put it in. He went back to the fridge and grabbed the pitcher of tea he had made this morning. That was one thing those bastards weren't getting, was his tea. It had taken him decades to learn how to properly grow it, dry it, and make his own blends. He sat the pitcher on the counter and grabbed a clean glass from the cabinet and filled it with ice from the fridge dispenser. About the time he finished pouring himself a glass, the microwave beeped. He opened the door and the dish was warm to the touch, but not hot. Not like old Earth microwaves he grew up with. This was a very smart microwave. It was able to target colder areas over hotter to evenly warm the dish to safe temps. He sat the dish down beside his tea and grabbed a fork. He put a generous amount of Parmesan on it and got his fork loaded up. As he was about to put it in his mouth, the chime to his front door went off. He sighed and took the bite. It was so good. He went over to the monitor and tapped it. He could see Leland was at the door. He hit the open door button and said, "Come on in, bro." The door opened and Leland stepped in. It closed behind him. Mordecai went back to his dinner, took another 2 bites before Leland came into the kitchen. He had showered and changed and smelled fresh. He looked Mordecai up and down, standing there in a pair of slippers, his boxers, and a slightly too tight white t-shirt. "I hope you didn't get dressed up for me," Leland said with a smile on his face. Mordecai gave him an up nod. "Fuck you, princess," he said. "What do you want?" Leland lifted up his left arm. He held a 6-pack of beer in his hand, and he sat it down on the counter in front of Mordecai. It was his beer that he made. "Thought I'd have a drink with my baby brother after a long day." Baby brother, Mordecai smirked. He was at least 8 centimeters taller than Leland and had about 15 kilos on him. "Yeah," he finally said. "I'll take one." Leland smiled, pulled out a long neck out of the box, popped the cap, and handed it towards Mordecai. Mordecai took it and began a long, hard swig on it. Leland opened one for himself and did the same. They both sat their bottles down at the same time in the same style. They both exhaled with satisfaction. "I see you finally listened to me and went with the less bitter hops." Leland nodded. "Yeah, I call it Kai Light in honor of you." He laughed. Mordecai chuckled. "Ha ha," he said sarcastically. "So what brings you here? We would have seen each other in a few hours." Leland's smile began to fade. It was still there on his lips, but it was disappeared from his eyes. Mordecai knew whatever it was serious. Leland reached into his shirt pocket and produced a paper envelope. "When I got home, I found this on the door." He handed it over to Mordecai. It was a letter from the governor of Ladrana District 1, Colonel Lucia Jimenez. "She's the governor now?" Mordecai said, reading the outside of the letter. "Apparently," Leland replied in a hushed tone. "Go on, read it." Mordecai pulled the letter out. It was only a few sentences long. Mordecai couldn't believe what he was reading. "Is this a joke?" Leland shook his head. "Seems not. I am to report tomorrow morning to the Rivers Landing 1 Earth Medical Center to undergo a reversal of the longevity process. Then I will be sent home to live out the remainder of my days in service of 1 Earth." Mordecai was horrified. This letter was basically stating that his brother was too old and he was to cease any longevity procedures that were permanent or currently active. He would be allowed to live to a natural age, but he wouldn't be allowed to live longer than a natural life. They can't do this. Leland shrugged. "They can and they are. I'm not sure if I will be the first, but I won't be the only one." Mordecai began to tear up. He fought them back, but it was difficult. He couldn't imagine living in the world without his brother. "I won't let them," he finally said. Leland smiled. "Sorry, baby brother. I don't think that is going to be possible. I've been talking to some of their grunts, and they were shocked to find out how old I was. They said where they come from, no one lives more than a few 100 years. Seems it's been going on over there for quite a while." "No," Mordecai said. "They aren't bringing their problems to this world. I won't allow it." "There is nothing you can do. That is a fucking army out there, brother," Leland said, exploding outward towards Mordecai. After a few moments of silence, Leland said, "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Mordecai shook his head. "It's all right." "No, it's not," Leland said. "They want to rob me of my life because someone a long time ago in a government I've never seen signed a piece of paper saying it was not our choice when it's our life." "I won't let them," Mordecai finally said. "I don't know what we are going to do, but we aren't going to idly sit by and let them do this." Leland scoffed and took another swig of his beer and sat it back down. "What are you going to do, baby brother?" Mordecai followed suit, took another drink of his beer. "I'll fight." I'll make them regret ever stepping foot here. Anything for you, I will do. Leland stood there a moment, looking at his baby brother. He could barely remember what the world was like before Mordecai was born. They were only a few years apart. What Mordecai was talking about could take them both from each other. As fighting the emissaries would likely lead to their deaths, and that of many others. Kai, he began, I can't ask you to risk your life, your family's lives, for me. Mordecai with tears in his eyes, and his voice cracking, you are my family too. He wiped the tears from his face. Lee, you aren't going to change my mind on this. I will fight them for you, with you by my side or not. It doesn't matter. Leland walked over to Mordecai and put his arms around him and hugged him. All right, baby brother. We will do this together, because you will get yourself killed if I'm not there to protect you. Mordecai let out a light laugh through his tears. Same old man. They had spent most of the night together, calling in people they trusted, including Rachel. In Mordecai's front room, they had assembled about 20 people. They brought their arms with them, and a few had brought some new things, stuff they began to develop and build shortly after the arrival of the emissaries. Some of it was pretty cutting-edge stuff. Ladrana's technology was at least 100 years more advanced than what One Earth had, but Ladrana never used any of it in weapons production until now. Bert was talking. I used to be an engineer for Gertman Lutling back on Earth. We were one of the largest suppliers of arms and armor to the U.S. military when that was still a thing. It's been a while, but it's all started coming back to me. We had a division there. Its sole job was to push the envelope of what we could do, but it also came up with ideas that were far beyond our abilities at the time, but not now. I present to you LDF Armor 1.0. LDF? Mordecai asked. Bert smirked at Mordecai and then winked. Ladrana Defense Force, what else? There were a few groans from the group. Even though they were planning on going to war with One Earth, many were still hesitant, thinking it might not be needed. They believed they should at least talk with them first, maybe persuade them that this isn't the inner worlds and doesn't have the inner world's population problems. Hold off on creating an army just yet, Mordecai finally said. We will name ourselves later if need be, but continue, show us what this can do. Bert got excited at this. He picked up the device that was on the coffee table and strapped it to his belt. All right, it's pretty simple. You just hit this and it will do the rest. Bert pushed a button, but nothing appeared to happen. Do what? Leland finally said after a few seconds. Bert just continued to smile. Watch. After a few seconds, a black mesh started to grow from the device, up his torso and down his legs. Then there were several flashes of blue light. After each little blue flash of light, a small piece of metal armor appeared, attaching itself to the black mesh. After about 3 seconds, it reached his head. This is the cool part, he said really fast, as the black mesh began to consume his head and the metal armor plates formed a helmet around his head and face. He kind of reminded Mordecai of an old Earth comic book character he once saw a movie of. Bert began to speak. His voice was slightly distorted.
It can take multiple hits from a 50 caliber rifle from 10 feet away. It will render most small arms fire useless.
Mordecai nodded. Yes, projectile weapons, but they are using some sort of energy weapons. Protons, a female voice said. Their weapons use some sort of accelerated protons. I've seen them use it on the test range. It shoots out bolts of protons.
It's a blade of Bert finally said.
You could hear the smile in his voice.
It should be able to take a few hits. Last week I had Andre fire the laser cannon at me, point blank. Got a bit toasty, but I was fine otherwise.
Mordecai looked over at the woman who had spoke up about the emissary's weapons. I'm sorry, I don't know you. What makes you think they are using particle weapons? She was nervous, a tiny woman. She was no taller than 150 centimeters. She stepped closer to Mordecai and Bert. Meta, she said. Meta? Mordecai asked. Just Meta, she said with a firm voice. She had found more confidence. All right, Meta, Mordecai replied. Tell us what you know. I was a physicist for many years before coming to Ladrana. I studied high-energy particle physics for centuries. I know what a particle accelerator sounds like and looks like. When I saw them firing their weapons on the test range, it took me back to another time in my life. I knew right away what they were. Mordecai nodded and pointed to Bert's armor. You think this auto-generated tinfoil Bert has created will stop them? She shook her head. Not by itself. But if we were able to generate a magnetic field inside the armor plates, we might be able to slow them down or deflect them. But part of the blast will still hit hard, and some of the particles will get through, and they will cause a lot of havoc on biological material. Then there is also the radiation that you will be exposed to, and your body will soak it up like a sponge. Mordecai looked at Bert. Can the plates generate a magnetic field? Bert shrugged.
Probably. But even with the most advanced power cells and what I know about particle physics, it needs to be pretty powerful and it won't last long.
Mordecai looked down at his watch. It was 4 a.m. Leland was supposed to report to the medical center by 9 a.m. All right, you have 4 hours. Bert laughed.
Can't promise you much and can't promise it will work.
Whatever, Bert. Meta, will you give Bert a hand? He asked. She nodded. Yes, but he's going to have to get out of that armor. It's kind of freaking me out. He looks like a half-melted wax mannequin in that thing. There were a few laughs, but Bert was not amused.
It's not meant to be stylish, it's meant to protect.
She smiled at him. Yes, Bert, but still, take it off. I need to be able to examine its electronics and power systems. Bert tapped a button, and this time yellow flashes started to descend down his upper body and ascend his lower body as the armor plates disappeared and the black mesh began to crawl back to the device on his belt. After a few seconds, he was out of it, and Meta grabbed at his belt and snatched the device. Within a second, she had part of the outside shell of it removed and said, Wow, this is extremely impressive, Bert. He stood there a second and beamed. Yeah, I know. I'm an artist. Then Bert bowed. I will return, and he turned and followed Meta to the garage. Mordecai turned back to the group assembled in his living room. All right, weapons, what do we have? Rachel spoke up, mostly projector rifles based on 7,000-year-old designs. But Andre has something. She motioned towards a man standing behind Mordecai's couch near the windows. Andre stepped around the couch and towards where Mordecai and Leland were standing. He was an imposing figure. He was several centimeters taller than Mordecai and anyone else in the group. He had a large muscular frame. He was also bald and the light glistened off his head. Mordecai had hoped he would never run into this man down a dark alley. He looked at Mordecai in the eyes and began to speak in a loud, booming voice. Like Bert, I also worked for a weapons developer on Earth for the U.S. military. And like them, we had what we called a Dreamers Division, where we worked on things that were far beyond our abilities at the time. He smiled. Come, he said as he began to walk past them and towards the kitchen area. When he arrived, he had came in with a crate that was about 1.5 meters in length and 1 meter tall. It was now sitting by the entrance to the living room near the kitchen table. He walked to one side of the crate and said, A little help? He motioned towards Mordecai. Mordecai walked over to the other end of the crate. Both men bent at the knees and lifted the crate and sat it on the table. Andre took off the lid. Inside it was 4 items that looked like rifles, but nothing that Mordecai had ever seen before. Andre pulled out one of the weapons. There was a switch he flipped up and a dial he clicked to its first position. Both were near the handle and trigger of the weapon, which allowed for easy access with one hand while holding the weapon. The weapons came to life. It had a low hum to it, and several small and very faint lights came on as well. He cleared his throat with a deep growl almost. This, gentleman, is a precision instrument of violence to bring shock, awe, and to incapacitate your fellow man. He smiled as he said this, but unlike Bert's upbeat persona, Andre's demeanor was much darker, had an almost sinister quality to it. It was intense looking at the man as he was smiling and admiring the weapon in his hand. Mordecai shot a look over at Leland, one that said, This guy's insane. Leland nodded at him, understanding the look. Mordecai looked back at the man, smiling over his work as he slowly moved the weapon side to side in his hands and admired every curved, bolt, soft edge it had. What can it do? Mordecai finally asked. Oh, yes, Andre said. It's an energy weapon I've been developing for quite a while. Might not be as advanced as what One Earth is using, but it's every bit as powerful. It has 3 settings. The first setting is designed to cause light damage. It will knock a bull out for hours. Setting 2, that is where things get interesting.
It is fatal if you hit a vital area like the head or the chest, but otherwise I wouldn't want to be the poor bastard on the other end.
He went silent. Mordecai, with a quizzical look on his face, finally asked, "And setting 3?" The man's attention was suddenly pulled back from wherever it had wandered.
Ah, yes, setting 3. Don't ever use setting 3.
"Why is that?" Mordecai said with a bit of hesitation. Andre smiled again. It was unnerving to see him smile.
Pure chaos.
"All right," Mordecai said in an almost whisper. "These 4 are the only ones you have?"
No, I have 30 more out in my truck, Andre replied. With more resources and some time, I can produce as many as you will need.
"Okay, I guess I will have to do. Anything else?" Mordecai asked. The man smiled.
I have grenades and the tank.
Leland spoke up, a bit of shock in his voice. "A tank? Did you say a tank?" Andre stood up to his full height and nodded.
Yes.
"Why do you have a tank?" Mordecai asked. Andre shrugged.
Bert and I got bored a few centuries ago.
"Right," Mordecai said. "Bert!" In a faint voice that came from the garage, Bert said, "Busy." "All right. I don't think we will need the tank yet. If all goes well, we won't need any of this. This is all just in case," Leland finally said. "But keep the engine warm." Andre nodded. He picked up the bag that was sitting near the crate. He pulled out a small device. Leland and Mordecai assumed these were the grenades.
Work like any grenade you've used. Pull the pin and throw. Oh, one thing. 3 settings, similar to the rifle. The first setting will knock out anyone within a 3-meter radius from it. Setting 2 will maim and kill. And setting 3...
Mordecai interrupted him. "Pure chaos." Andre shook his head.
No, what would give you that idea? It just increases the lethal range from 3 meters to 6.
Mordecai nodded and sarcastically said, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense."
Perfect sense.
Andre repeated back in the same sarcastic tone, and an eerie, creepy smile on his face. "All right," Mordecai said. "Bert!" Like before, a muffled holler came out of the garage. "Busy!" "How many of those armor generators do you have?" Mordecai asked. "Upgraded or just working?" he heard Bert yell back. "Yeah," Mordecai said. He knew it was vague. "Well, 2 upgraded by the time you need them, but there are a total of 15, Bert yelled back. "Okay," Mordecai said, walking back to the living room. He flipped on the TV and it showed a map of River's Landing, with several buildings circled in blue and a few points outside of the city in red. "All right, I will head in alone to the command barracks here to talk with the colonel. See if we can resolve this peacefully. Hopefully we can." He paused. "And I will get out of there without a firefight. But if things go south, we will split up into 5 groups of 4, creating 5 fire teams." He broke the group in his living room up into 5 groups of 4 and pointed at each of the red areas, telling them where they would set up. He went over as much detail as he had and answered any questions they might have had. He looked down at his watch at the end of the briefing. They only had a few hours left. "All right, get your gear and prepare in whatever fashion you need to," he said. This was the grim part of the talk. "I have hope this will end peacefully," he finally said. "But if it doesn't, I just want to make it clear to everyone here and give you all a chance to bow out. If it doesn't end peacefully, we will have kicked off a war with One Earth and the army that now occupies our world. Some of us will likely die, so if you want nothing more to do with us, no one would judge you for that." There were a few murmurs in the group, a few doubtful faces, but no one left. Rachel put an arm around his. "Till the end, Uncle," she said. Colonel Lucia Jimenez sat in her office in the command barracks. Dawn had just broken. Time on this world was weird. It was summer, but by 8:30 a.m. the sun was just now cresting above the horizon. It was so alien to her. She was a native of Earth from Mexico City. She was born and raised there. The air there was choked full of pollution, and the climate was so hot and dry, Earth had been undergoing centuries of climate change at this point. Then the One Earth movement began when she was in her late 60s. It was a movement that the unified Earth government couldn't ignore. It was seeking to unify all the colonies of humans that had set off thousands of years prior, under one civilization again. It was to help the human population of Earth spread out, as it had reached almost 25 billion since the advent of longevity. Extreme measures had to be taken on Earth to be able to provide everyone with housing, food, and water. One of those measures was to put a maximum age one could use longevity to extend their life. In most circumstances, it was 300 years, but there were exceptions, such as for political, religious, and military leaders. She herself was almost 1,000 years old, but it would have been impossible to replace her experience and abilities. She picked up her cup of coffee, fresh black coffee, something she remembered in her youth. She only had it once, and it was very expensive. The conquest of the inner worlds had gone pretty well. The Sol System's colonies were the first to succumb. Not much fight in them, as they lived in fragile domes or unpressurized cities that floated in the clouds. The inner world colonies put up a bit more resistance, but they eventually caved and joined. She had joined the military in her late 60s because she believed in the message of One Earth, no matter the cost. She sat her coffee down. A moment of sadness ran through her. She had outlived all her family and children. She had never bothered to get remarried or have more children. As long as she was in demand by One Earth, no matter how long they needed her, it was too painful to have more children and only to have to say goodbye to them. She shook the thought out of her head. Today was a big day. Leland Weber, the representative of this world, as he claimed when they first met, will be the first of this world's population to undergo forced naturalization of their life. He will be examined by their doctors who will reverse any permanent changes to him that allow him to continue to live in this artificial state of immortality. She was annoyed and jealous of this place, with its clean air, uncluttered skylines, its abundance of food, fresh water, and space. She was mostly annoyed how they have allowed their people to live so long. Leland and his brother were among the oldest here, over 7,000 years old. That was almost unheard of in One Earth. There were, of course, a few who were that old, politicians and religious leaders. She was a rarity amongst military leaders. She was exceptionally good at what she did and lived to tell about it. The clock in her office gave a small chime. She looked over at it. 9 a.m. She stood. She was in her full military dress. It was an important day after all. It was the first steps to bringing Ladrana into One Earth as an equal member. She gave herself a quick look in the mirror in her office, perfectly clean and pressed uniform, without a hair out of place. She was pleased by her appearance. She looked at the clock again, and it said 9:01 a.m. She didn't expect Leland to show up exactly at 9 a.m. She felt her handwritten note she had delivered to his house, albeit short, would convey the importance of him voluntarily doing this. He was a leader of this world, and if he complied with this, then it would be easier for his people to follow suit. However, she would only give him a short grace period to show up. If he was not here in the next 15 minutes, she had a team ready to find him and bring him to the medical center. She hoped it wouldn't come to that. He had been far more reasonable of a man than his brother had been. Her face contorted a bit at the thought of Mordecai. She knew if his brother couldn't rein him in, that he would be a thorn in her side. All he ever talked about when they met was what people had the right to choose their own way of life, and that the government was an auxiliary to build roads and nothing more. She almost wanted to spit each time she thought of his views on the government. He must have been an American in his first life, she thought. She had met a few old Americans who talked about things like freedom, this and that, things which had no place in the new order of things. It was all about the community and things greater than oneself. It was selfish to think otherwise, and it was something she would gladly stomp out of the human condition for all of eternity. Here on Ladrana, she would start with the brother of Leland Weber, with elation. It was her duty to bring order to the chaos of these outer colonies, who had gone far too long without the guidance of the shepherd. She looked over at her clock again. It was now 9:15 a.m. She looked out the window of her office, down the main street of the river's landing, but saw no sign of activity or the arrival of Leland Weber. She shook her head. Idiots. Don't do this, she said in a whisper under her breath. She turned on heel and headed for the door. She left her office. There was a small waiting room and a receptionist's desk where a young lieutenant sat. She walked over to him. He stood to attention. As you were, she said, and then asked, "Any word on Mr. Leland Webber's arrival, Lieutenant?" The young lieutenant lessened his stance and then sat back down and looked over his computer terminal. "No, ma'am. I'm not showing anything." "All right," she said. "Notify me as soon as anything comes in." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. She turned and hastily walked back into her office. She shut the door and pulled out her communicator from her pocket. "Colonel Lee Way, prepare to move out on Operation O Brother." Mordecai arrived in Rivers Landing a little before 9 a.m. His first task was to locate his son and wife, both of whom had worked a double shift overnight. He walked down Main Street, free of almost any Ladrana citizens. It was mostly the civilian members of One Earth that had arrived. There were soldiers in full combat armor that were patrolling around, but none of them had taken notice of him. They hadn't specifically banned weapons being carried around in town, or even the ownership of them, but Mordecai knew that after today, that would change. A few soldiers took a long look at him, but then quickly lost interest, either because they didn't want to deal with him, or they knew who he was, and that he was a founder of this world and important to what little government Ladrana did have. He quickly walked down the main street and headed towards the newly constructed medical center. As he approached its doors, he now understood its urgency to be built and the size they wanted to build it to, because now he knew what they were planning. He got to the door and it opened automatically. He walked in, and there was a receptionist desk in the middle of the lobby he entered. He knew he would need to check in to be able to gain access to any of the building, as they had heavily restricted access to the building to Ladrana citizens. With the exception of medical personnel, they had sniped from around the area. He walked up to the desk. I need to speak with Dr. Alicia Stone, he said. The receptionist gave him a cautious look. "Weapons aren't allowed here," she firmly said to him. "Fine, I will check it if need be, but I still need to speak to my wife," he said. The receptionist pulled up something on her computer terminal and told him her shift ended an hour ago. She's no longer on the premises. "Oh," Mordecai said. He could have sworn she said she wasn't off till 10 a.m., but maybe she got off early. Any idea where she could have gone?" The woman at the desk coughed. "I have no idea, sir. I'm not in charge of your wife. Anything else?" "No," Mordecai said briskly. Any other day he would have read the riot act about having manners, but he just said, "Thank you." "Uh-huh," said the receptionist. Mordecai turned and walked out of the door back onto the main street. He looked around, but like before, saw a lot of foot traffic, mostly soldiers on patrol and One Earth civilians heading to jobs or about their day. He didn't see Alicia or her vehicle nearby. He looked at his watch. It was 10 till 9. This couldn't be happening. He didn't have time to track down Alicia. He pulled out his phone and dialed her. It went immediately to her voicemail. He exhaled in frustration. What in the hell is she doing, and why did she shut off her phone? He headed across the street to the other side of Main and headed towards the grocery store, which was right around the corner. He walked in and scanned around. It was a large place, but he saw her. She was sitting at the front of the store on a chair at the cafe, drinking a tea with a dirty plate in front of her. She was reading a magazine. He rushed over to her. She saw him. "Kai, what are you doing here?" she asked. She stood, and he grabbed her into his arms and kissed her. "Oh, Kai," she said. He let go of her, and she stepped back and looked him over. "What in the world are you wearing?" she said, and then she saw the rifle. "What? Why are you armed?" "Shh! Listen to me," he said. "I can't explain. Not here. Get Aiden and head home." She shook her head. "What? Why? He's not off for another hour." "I can't explain now. Get Aiden. Have him say it's family emergency or just have him walk out. But I need you to go straight home. Rachel will intercept you and bring you up to speed. You can do that for me, right?" Fear gripped her gut. She nodded. "All right," she said. "Just tell me, are you going to be safe?" He nodded. "As safe as anyone else at the moment," he said. "All right, fine," she said. "Get Aiden, get home, and you return to us safely, all right?" He nodded. "I promise you." He looked down at his watch. "I really have to go. I love you, and tell Aiden I love him too." She nodded. "I will." With that, Mordecai turned and rushed back out the doors. He got back onto the street and looked around. Same thing. Hardly anyone was out this time of morning. He saw the command barracks. It was a few blocks away. He looked back down at his watch, 9:05 a.m. If he ran, he would get there in no time. He began to run and headed towards the command barracks. There was a moment of silence on the radio, then a click and a male voice came over her communicator. "Yes, Colonel. Any deviations?" "None so far," she said. "Be ready to move out in 15 minutes." "Yes, ma'am," the voice said. She put the communicator back into her pocket and walked back over to the window. An uneasy feeling came over her as she looked over the peaceful vista. She knew this would likely be the last of the easy mornings she had come to know. She knew that there would be resistance to this move. She fully expected it, but she always had hopes. They would see the error of their ways and see the logic of it, but they rarely did at first. She began to pace back and forth, keeping a stern eye on the clock in her office as it ticked over each minute. Eventually, it reached 9:25 a.m. She stopped her pacing and began to unhook the fasteners that held her tunic closed. She would go with the team to get Mr. Leland Weber. She got the first fastener unhooked when a knock came at her door. She quickly refastened it and turned on one heel. "Yes," she said. The door slowly opened. The young lieutenant was on the other side of it, with another man. She couldn't see who at first. "Ma'am, there is someone here to see you. He says it's important, concerning Mr. Leland Weber." She sighed. "Very well, let him in." The lieutenant stepped out of the way and let the door open further. She could see right away who it was. It was the brother of Mr. Leland Weber, Mordecai. A knot twisted up in her gut. She knew what was coming. He entered her office. The young lieutenant stood with his hand still on the handle, with his back to the door, waiting for her order. She watched Mordecai carefully. He wasn't dressed in his normal attire. He wore mostly black, had a vest on, boots, with a black and red device attached to his belt, which looked handcrafted and rushed when put together. He also carried a rifle, slung over his shoulder, but it wasn't a rifle she had ever seen before. She let her face express how she was feeling, as she let the disgust at the sight of him fill it. He walked into her office about 2 meters, stopped in the middle of it, and stood there with his hand clasped in front of him. She stood there a moment just glaring at him, then she turned to the lieutenant. "That will be all," she finally said. The young lieutenant looked at Mordecai and then at her and said, "Yes, ma'am. I will be right outside if you need me." She nodded. "Very well." She walked back over to behind her desk. She motioned to one of the empty chairs in front of her desk. "Please sit," she demanded more than suggested to him. He shook his head. "Thanks, but I think I will stand. This won't take long." She sat in her chair and moved it closer to the desk. She put her arms down on her desk and clasped them in front of her. "Oh?" she said. "What a shame. What is it you would like to discuss?" Mordecai didn't move. He just slightly shook his head. He pulled out a piece of paper. She recognized it as the one she had sent his brother the day before. Mordecai crumpled up the paper and tossed it onto her desk. "We only have one demand. Leave." She laughed. She picked up her coffee and leaned back in her chair and took a sip of it. "But we just got here," she finally said, with a sneer to her upper lip. She had been on a dozen worlds in the same exact situation before. She didn't back down then. She wasn't going to back down now. "If you leave, we will allow you to leave peacefully. We do not accept or recognize your authority here on Ladrana," he said to her. She quickly sat up in her chair, almost slamming her coffee cup down onto the desk, and then she smacked the desk hard. "You've already accepted it. You showed up with an army, did not give us a choice. Now we are making that choice," he said. "Leave now, peacefully, or from this moment on, there will not be a moment's rest for you, your soldiers, and their families. This is our world, not Earth's. It's not up to you to decide if we live or die. That choice is ours." She stood, and this time placing both hands on the desk and leaned forward. "God gave you an immortal soul. You have no need of immortal flesh. Comply or else." She could tell this had a significant impact on him. He almost took a step back. He had always assumed the laws were mandated as a form of control and managing limited resources on overpopulated worlds. It never occurred to him or anyone on Ladrana that this could be a religious mandate. He fumbled for a second to find his words. It had been many thousands of years since he had heard anyone speak of a deity such as God with any reverence or seriousness in their voice. He was unsure how to argue with them on this. All he could say, "There is no God. I've lived long enough, seen enough to know, if there was, he must have abandoned us long ago." She scoffed. "Your ignorance is astounding," she said. "I will lead you back to the path that is intended for man, by God, and one day you will stand there thanking me for it." He was unsure how to respond. This is not how he had planned this meeting to go. He had underestimated them a great deal, and knew this would likely end in violence. He was certain of that. So he just repeated what he had rehearsed in his mind. "That will never happen, so I implore you, leave now, and we will peacefully let you go. We are even open to relations with one Earth, just not with them in control here. If you need time, we are willing to give you at least 1 month to talk to whoever you need to, gather your troops, their families, and the civilians you brought with you, go back to your ships and leave." She stood there, tapping her finger on the desk. She was extremely agitated at this point. He had not only come in here making demands of her, he had also blasphemed, all serious offenses in her book. The most aggravating thing was that he was doing this from a position with no leverage. He was offering her nothing in return. He had no power here. He was a farmer, with a rifle slung on his back. He was hardly a threat to One Earth, let alone her. She smiled at him. "No dice," she said. "I will give you 1 hour to go fetch your brother and go to the medical center where you both will submit yourselves to naturalization." "And if I refuse?" he briskly said. She scoffed at him. "One way or another, Kai." She said his name with every bit of disdain she could muster. "You and your brother will be naturalized, and then that pretty little wife and handsome young son of yours, I will go after them next." With that, he hit the activation button on his armor. The speed of the black mesh had been increased. It almost instantly shot up and down his body, and he quickly covered his head, dozens of little blue flashes happening all over his body, placing little pieces of bluish silver armor. He then unslung the energy rifle from his shoulder, flipped the switch, and turned the dial up and aimed dead at her. She laughed. "Cute. I see you got some new toys," she asked. "Lieutenant!" she hollered out. The young lieutenant bursted in with a pistol in hand. Mordecai swung around and took aim at the lieutenant. He squeezed the trigger, hoping he hadn't clicked the setting beyond 1. There was a brilliant bluish-green flash that popped out of the end of his rifle. At the same time, the lieutenant's pistol made a loud humming sound, and an orange streak came from it. Mordecai shot the young lieutenant square in the chest. There was a moment of agony on his face. He went limp, and his unconscious body hit the door and then slid down to the floor with a hard thud. The blast from his pistol hit Mordecai in the shoulder. The armor held, and Mordecai barely felt it. He quickly turned his rifle back to Jimenez. She hadn't moved. He took aim. She didn't flinch. She had been shot at her entire life. She just smirked at him as he took aim and pulled the trigger. Another bluish-green flash came out of the end of his gun. It didn't hit her. It split in two and effortlessly warped around her, recombining behind her and hitting the wall. Mordecai was a bit confused at the moment. Her smirk turned into a smile. "You didn't think we let you see all our toys now, did you?" She reached under her desk and pulled out a pistol of her own. She quickly took aim and began to fire, but he had already jumped out of the way and down to the floor. Her first blast missed him. The second blast caught him in his left knee. This one he felt. He guessed the armor wasn't as protective there, or she was using a more powerful pistol. He quickly clicked his rifle up to setting 2 and turned, took aim at her, and let out several blasts at her. Like before, they all split and warped around and recombined behind her, hitting the wall. "Fuck," he said. "Indeed," she said. He was unable to hit her with the rifle blast. She stepped from behind the desk and slowly started walking towards him, with the pistol aimed dead at him. He ineffectively held his rifle on her. I wonder how much your armor can absorb. It's impressive. If you hadn't had it on, my lieutenant would have blown your arm clear off, and I would have done the same thing to your leg. She stopped about a meter from him, kept the pistol trained on him. You done? He didn't say anything to her. He just kept his rifle trained on her. She continued to say, like I said, you have 1 hour. Get your brother, and both of you report to the medical center for naturalization. Will you comply? She demanded. He remained silent. You can't fight us. That should be obvious to you by now. Your weapons are ineffective, and your armor will only take so many hits. Will you comply? She demanded again. This time she shot him in the gut. It felt like being hit in the gut with a hot iron. He groaned. He still held his rifle at her. He was tempted to pull the trigger again and emptied the power cell in hopes that one shot would get through. He gritted his teeth, flicked the rifle up to setting 3, and fired. He could feel the heat of the blast through his armor as it left the end of the rifle. It was a brilliant blue flash, and a bolt shot from the barrel heading straight at Jimenez. This time, instead of splitting, whatever was protecting her acted more like a wall. The blast lifted her up off her feet and threw her into the wall. She let out a scream of pain. Mordecai quickly got to his feet. With his rifle still trained on her, he looked at her. She had burns on her face, arms, hands, and upper body. Her neatly pressed and clean uniform tunic was now covered in black ash, burnt flesh, and blood. She lay there, propped up against the wall. Her breathing struggled, and her eyes were filled with fear as she saw Mordecai get up and walk towards her with the rifle still trained on her. She knew her defensive shield would not hold up to another blast like that. They had not anticipated they had energy weapons with such powerful blast. She was curious as to why it had taken him so long to step it up. She figured it might have even been dangerous to the user. She winced. A pain began in her chest and shot up her throat. Fuck, that hurt, she gurgled out. Her mouth was full of blood and tooth fragments. She couldn't remember the last time she was this injured. Do it. Kill me now. It will be your only chance.
No!
Mordecai yelled out. The speaker, his voice came through slightly distorted when he raised his voice. This doesn't have to be like this, he said. She managed a faint laugh. Yes, it does. Before he could respond, there was a sound of voices and boots hitting the ground coming from down the hall. He was about to be trapped, and he wasn't sure how many more shots he had, or what one of their rifles would do to him. He quickly looked around, trying to subdue his panic. She laughed softly again. Trapped like a fucking rat you are. He reached the door to her office as the first soldiers emerged into the small receptionist area from the hall. Mordecai quickly pushed the lieutenant out of the way, slamming the door shut and locking it. The door offered no real protection. Oinch bolts started to tear through the door, barely missing him. He quickly looked around. The window was his only way out. He was at least 4 stories up. He was not sure if the armor would help protect him from the fall, but it was probably a better option than what was in store for him when they got a hold of him. He ran over to the window. There was no visible way he could see to open it. It doesn't open, idiot, Jimenez said faintly. Mordecai hit the window with the butt of his rifle a few times. Jimenez faintly laughed. It's polycarbonate. It's 1,000 times stronger than glass. You would need a wrecking ball to get through it. Mordecai was running out of time. The door was almost just splinters. The fire team wasn't quite advancing yet. They appeared to be cautious. Mordecai took a few steps back, aimed his rifle at the window, pulling the trigger. Another brilliantly bright blue bolt emitted from the end of the rifle and slammed into the window. Half the wall exploded. They were showered with tiny bits of molten metal and concrete. Jimenez let out a loud scream as the debris hit her. He heard the order being given to move in. He held his breath and launched himself towards the window. Mordecai took flight out the window. It felt as if time was slowing down as he fell towards the ground. His heart rate shot through the roof. His breathing became heavy and erratic. Fear quickly took over as he fell. He wasn't sure if the armor would offer any fall protection. He quickly positioned himself to hit the ground and roll, hoping that would offer him enough protection with the armor to survive. It felt as if the seconds turned into minutes. Then bam! Both his feet planted into the ground several centimeters, launching up asphalt and dirt into the area. Mordecai felt every bit of it, but nothing broke on him. The armor did absorb a vast majority of the kinetic energy. The knee Jimenez had shot screamed out in pain. He knew he would have trouble walking, let alone running. The streets were still empty, but he could see the patrol soldiers quickly heading towards him in several directions. He checked his rifle. The energy cell was depleted. He released the energy cell, letting it hit the ground, and removed a fresh one from his vest. Locking it into place, the gun auto-primed itself, but this time the faint blue lights he saw earlier were much brighter red. He forgot what that meant. It was either the rifle was overheated and would not fire, or it was set on the highest setting. He was hoping it was the latter. The first patrol guards were less than 20 meters from him. They were approaching slowly with rifles aimed at him. They were ordering him to drop his rifle and lay on the ground. He wasn't going to follow that order. He reached inside his vest and pulled out a grenade. He pulled the pin and threw it at the closest group of guards. The grenade landed half a meter from them. But they didn't react. They either never saw a grenade or figured their invisible protection or body armor would protect them. A second after hitting the ground, the grenade exploded in a bright purple blast. It was an amazing purple color, one which Mordecai had never seen before. The blast was a lot bigger than 6 meters Andre said it would be, at its maximum setting. The blast wave almost reached him. After the blast subsided and the smoke cleared, there was a massive hole in the street and the 2 guards were gone. Fucking hell, he whispered to himself. He pulled out another grenade and held it up. The other patrol guards took cover behind vehicles and in between buildings and stopped their advances. He was still mostly surrounded. He wasn't sure how he was going to get out of this. He looked over at the closest cross street he was near. There were only 2 guards down that road. He pulled the pin to the grenade and threw it at them. The same thing, another amazingly purple flash, debris and smoke, another crater, and the guards had disappeared. Mordecai took off running down the side street. It was more of a hobbled jog than a run. He was hoping he had caught the attention of the team surrounding the town, and he could make it to Andre's team that was nearby. He could hear pounding boots running behind him. He figured they were only mere meters behind him. He was unable to go any faster than he was. It would only be a few seconds before he felt hands grasping at his back. Before that could happen, Andre and his team emerged from the wooded area that was only about 40 meters from him. With their armor engaged and weapons drawn, they opened fire and Mordecai jumped to the side behind a vehicle to avoid being hit in the crossfire. As with Jimenez, he could see their bolts splitting and warping around the advancing patrol guards. He thought he heard Andre order them to go up to the next setting, and several more blasts came down the road. Same as before, Mordecai made it around to the side of the car and then the front. He yelled out, 3, 3, 3, hoping they would understand to go to setting 3 before it was too late. The guards began to open fire on Andre and his team. They didn't have the modified armor like Mordecai did, and there was a good chance the rifles would be lethal. Mordecai looked around his cover, saw the guards had taken up various positions along the road. They were firing towards Andre and his team, who had also taken cover. Mordecai aimed at the closest guard to him and opened up fire. He could feel the heat of the blast as it left the barrel and hit the closest guard. The bolt slammed into the guard, knocking him off his feet. Parts of his body armor exploded, and he heard the patrol guard scream out in pain. Mommy, Mommy, oh God, it hurts, Mommy, help me. The guard screamed over and over. He felt a lump grow in his stomach when he heard this. He had never wanted to cause that much harm to another human being, even during the resource wars on Earth. As best as he could, he avoided wounding the raiders that would show up from time to time in the encampment where he and Leland were. He tried blocking out the cries for Mother out of his mind. This was war. He took aim at another patrol guard, squeezed his trigger. There was a loud beep from his rifle. He pulled the trigger again. Same thing. He then heard Andre's distinctive booming voice.
Get the fuck out of there. We will cover you. Your rifle is overheated.
Mordecai slung the rifle over his shoulder and looked for his best path. He had cover on the sidewalk as there were a few vehicles parked on the road that he could use as cover. He looked back at the advancing patrol guards. There were about 8 of them. The troops that were up in Jimenez's office were now on the street and heading towards them. He moved as quickly as he could to the next vehicle. Blasts from the patrol guards whizzed past him, hitting the vehicles and asphalt. He had covered most of the distance. He was now within 5 meters of Andre and his team. There was not much cover left between him and them. He heard Andre's order out, "Now!" He and his team switched to a lower setting and began to rapidly fire at the advancing patrol guard. And Mordecai took the moment to make a run for it. He made it to Andre's position behind what was left of a trash can and bench. He fell to the ground and quickly positioned himself behind the trash can. "How long will it take to cool down?"
It's probably fried, Andre said. It's only designed to handle 1 blast from the 3rd setting. How many did you get off? 2 or 3?
"Yeah," Mordecai replied.
It's fried. Do you have any grenades left?
Andre bellowed at him over all the weapons fire. A dozen of them filled the air with a loud buzzing sound that was almost deafening. "Yes, 1," Mordecai yelled back.
Then throw the damn thing.
Andre yelled back at him. Mordecai reached inside his vest, grabbed the grenade, and pulled it out. "Max setting?"
Hell yes, there are more
"Coming," Andre replied. Mordecai turned the top of the grenade twice, setting it to max, pulled the pin, stood up, and lobbed it as hard as he could. He took 2 blasts to the chest. His body erupted into a tremendous amount of pain, and he fell to the ground.
Get down,
he heard Andre yell out to the others. Then he felt all the Andre's weight on him. Mordecai was in a huge amount of pain, and he was beginning to fade in and out of consciousness. There was a rumbling in the ground, and the entire area was bathed in purple light. Even through his armor, he could feel the rush of air past him as the grenade went off, causing a vacuum and now sucking the air back into its epicenter. A second after that, the blast wave hit them too. It knocked him and Andre from out behind their cover. Large pieces of debris, rock, wood, concrete, dirt, all shot past them, pelted them in the process. Even through the armor, he could feel it on his exposed parts. Andre was still on top of him, absorbing most of the blast. The man began to curse to high heavens as pieces of debris slammed into him. Then it was over. There was silence. He felt Andre get off of him, grabbing his arm and helping him to his feet. His vision was a bit blurred, his ears were ringing, his head was hurting. He was having trouble breathing, and his knee was throbbing. He looked down where the patrol guards were. They were no longer there. There was a crater several times larger than the other grenades. Part of the buildings were gone, and so were vehicles. "You said they were non-lethal at setting 1, Mordecai faintly said to Andre.
I might have miscalculated,
he said. They could see the remainder of the patrol guard running back down the road away from them. Mordecai couldn't blame them. They just saw half their numbers disappear in a purple blast. There was honking. Mordecai and Andre turned as 3 trucks pulled up with 2 more teams. One of the trucks was driven by Leland with Rachel in the passenger seat. Leland got out of the truck. "Let's get our people out and get the hell out of here." He had his rifle drawn and his armor engaged, and he ran over towards Mordecai with Andre. "Kai, you all right?" Mordecai was able to say a few words. "Just peachy," he said. "Damn," Leland said. He took the other arm of his brother and slung it over his shoulder and helped Andre carry him back to the truck. They loaded him into the back seat. "Stay with me, Kai. Stay with me," Leland yelled out at him. "Let's roll." The fire teams got back into the bed of the trucks. Leland had gotten back into the driver's. Rachel leaned over the seat, helping him turn off his armor. "Jesus Christ," she said. "Dad hit it. We got to get him to a hospital. He's got burns all over his chest and face." The 3 trucks turned around and sped away from town. Leland had managed to intercept Alicia and Aiden and told them to go to Bert's. Their homes were no longer safe, and as far as he knew, the emissaries didn't know any of the others involved here. But he'd imagined they would start searching soon. They wouldn't be safe there for long, just enough time to catch their breath and plan their next steps.